Let me start by telling you up front where I'm going with this. Swarms are not in a good place at the moment versus vehicles. They're too weak and too hard to use, and there are damage application issues you most likely are not aware of. So I want swarms buffed. But, and this is important, it's not about just the damage they do. Swarms are a lot, and I mean a lot more complex than just damage per missile. But it's not just swarms. Tanks are monstrously overpowered at the same time. Combine all these elements and things are truly broken. So if you've ever asked for a damage buff to swarms on the forums, or just by screaming it into the void in a rage, you likely ask to make things worse. Let me take you through it. Now, like I said, it's complicated. I just cannot do this topic justice unless I go into detail. Balance issues are worth the time it takes to look into them carefully. So there will be some detailed analysis, pie charts and the like. There will also be some awesome swarm battles and more exciting things, but we do need to do this properly. This also means explaining damage application models. We will start by looking at a few battles, but before we get going, can I remind the trolls I'm deliberately in risky situations so the damage can be clearly seen. I deliberately take a little extra lock-on time so the vehicle's stats show on the screen as well. That's also why I shoot straight rather than aiming up. In other words, the way I play is for the footage clarity. Here is me, Proto Swarms and 10% of damage mods, edited by a militia swarmer fighting in a Python. Now I don't have any proficiency on this character, only level 5 swarms so my lock time is minimised. The reason for the no proficiency is so I can test most swarm builds more accurately. It lets me build a character that's more base. Still, this is a very good swarm character with proto level swarms, complex damage mods, very good modules, and even a proto suit, although in the video you'll see I wear advanced because I know I'm going to die a lot, so it's a money minimising operation. Just before we get going, let's watch this idiot fail grenade. Nice one, dude. This hardened Python turns up, and me and Mr. Militia Swarm take him on. That's my 6 missiles, and his 4 about to hit. The Python's got 1,548 shields. After 28 missiles, 4 from the militia, and 24 damage-modded proto-missiles from me, there's a potential 6,688 damage hitting the ship over a period of 14 seconds. We must have got him close to death. Well, no, actually, he's down to 1,343 shields. Our best efforts cost him 205 hit points. That sucks. Maybe we need more swarmers, since shields are more resilient to armour, so next time we put 3 swarmers against an incubus. 1 proto, 2 militia. I get the jump on him as I hit his ship as it's being delivered. So we have a non-hardened ship at the start, no pilot in the ship at the start, proto swarms with damage mods, and 3 swarmers versus 1 vehicle. Surely all the odds are in our favour. No. Turns out that after 44 seconds of non-stop swarm shots from 3 players, firing a total of 66 missiles, dealing 15,528 hit points of potential damage, he's still not even lost all his shields. Now I fought this pilot a lot during filming footage for this video. He was one of the least skilled pilots I've seen. He crashed often and he got his module timing wrong, and he wasn't very good at manoeuvring the ship. But it didn't matter, as you can see. He could have just landed in front of us and sat there and the result would have been the same. Let's try again, although first let's enjoy a happy moment from that game where I kill this proto-suit wearing, proto-rail rifle wielding guy with my militia submachine gun. Oh, and let's bleed him out. We want to make sure he loses that gear. So 3 of us again are taking on 1 double hardened dropship. Look at that. That's 10 missiles all about to hit at once. That's at least 2,300 incoming damage. He has 1,748 health. Surely we have him. No. What? Well, here's another 10 missiles. Still nope. Take note of his positions before we move on. He's about to land on that building's roof. Even though we couldn't kill him, it seems we did manage to scare him. How do I know this? Because look at this. This bag of douche called in a rail tank on top of the building we chased him to, and then later recalled it when he ran out of ammo and got another one in. Now these are double hardened dropships. I know this due to the amount of armour and shields they have and the damage they're taking. Let's take double hardened dropships to Judge's Court. Could we kill him? Not a chance. Did we deter him? As you saw, no. Did he struggle to fight back? No. Killed me in 2 shots. Our swarms balanced against this build of dropship. Not a chance. Judgment 1. Broken. These are just some examples to help you see the issue, but we need to model these so we can analyse different battle situations and different builds. These charts represent the Python and Incubus builds we just looked at. Ignore the numbers and focus on the beige bar. It represents the vehicle's health as a percentage of its total remaining health. It starts here at 100% health. When it reaches the bottom, like here on this Gorgon, the vehicle's dead. Each mark on the bottom axis represents a hit. As you see, the model matches reality. The Incubus here loses its shields, but after that it goes on to be nearly invulnerable, while the Python, as we saw, is invulnerable. I'll use these model charts a lot. All you really need to focus on is how tall the beige bar is and how quickly it takes to hit the bottom. These are examples of broken balance. These are examples of more suitable balance. If you see a chart like these two, a big fat beige bar that never hits the bottom, then that's broken. Fat and long is bad. Well, in balanced model charts it is. This is not a window of opportunity CCP, this is God mode. So let's see how we do against tanks. We've all seen this. Look at it, CCP. Look at it. Now fix it. I guess we need to bring out those proto-swarms and deal with these guys. I'm guessing you are now well ahead of me. I'm sure fellow proto-swarmers have gone to get a coffee, as they don't even need to watch to know what happens next. But keep watching anyway, and enjoy the rage-inducing experience that is fighting tanks with swarms. As we see, if you're trapped in a building surrounded by tanks, swarms are not going to help. So let's try again against more tanks, but this time I have some cover and some height, plus another swarmer helping me, who for reasons that are about to come clear should have called his character Shooty McFace. Man, that hit his face so hard his neck got stretched like a rubber band. I bet that stung. Thanks to the tank's third-person view, the tank has no trouble seeing over this wall and shooting at me. The railing didn't stop him getting shots on me, but they do stop me getting a lock. Like Shooty there, I have to stare in the tank's eye to get a lock, and since they can see over onto the roof, they can see me and I cannot see them. So they are ready as soon as I put my head over to lock on. So step 1, simply getting a lock can be extremely tricky. But let's see how I do damage-wise. Now these are advanced missiles with a damage mod against a militia tank with no hardness. Notice brave Mr. Tanker hopping out there to save his butt. But it didn't help thanks to Mr. Blue there being on the ball. That seemed alright actually, based on proto-missiles hitting that low-level tank, it seemed to die reasonably quickly. But he was already halfway through his shields by the time I got to him. Let's look at the damage model for an advanced swarm like mine versus a Soma like we just saw. Note that that tank had no repping module, so that's reflected in the model. As you see, the model matches the actual battle. about 5 volleys to kill it. Now the reason it matters that the model matches reality is because later the only way to balance with so many weapons, builds and scenarios is to use a model, but we'll come back to that later. Let's see what prototype swarms do to armor hardened tanks. So far, nothing. Here he has 4,000 armor, that's his maximum. He drops to 3,318, that's only 682 damage. Now, 4 seconds later my next volley hits. See here his armor is back to 4,000 again. His regen is high enough to eliminate my damage before my next shot comes in. This is his damage model, fat and long. This tank is invulnerable to a solo swarm. Now while we may argue that tanks should not be soloed by a single swarmer, a prototype swarm should at least be able to do something. This is as effective a weapon against this tank as a scrambler pistol is. Our shield tank's the same. Yes, invulnerable. That's in a battle scenario to a single swarm. So let's just take a look at all of our good tanks and assault dropships piloted by skilled pilots versus a single proto swarm with a 10% damage increase. You know by now what charts that shape mean. Don't even waste the ammo. It looks like you better bring a friend. So here's the same thing, but 2 proto swarmers. That's better, sort of. Look here and here. That's 10 volleys, that's about 50 seconds. If this was in ambush, that means that this whole pie represents the length of the match, about 8 minutes. This bit is 2 of your team fighting a single tank. That's a large proportion of your team's efforts. And even worse, those vehicles only die at this point because they hung around long enough for you to shoot them constantly for a full minute. The same with the gun Logi, it only dies because it hangs around long enough for the hardness to wear off. Let's make that a bit more realistic, shall we? Here are the same vehicles if they move and return after a few shots, then move away again, then come back. The gun Logi's a joke, clearly, but the others are indestructible too, except the Python. Filling a Python with 2 hardeners like this reduces its base shield too low to take that many swarms at once. Anyway, enough charts. The judgment's clear. Double hardened vehicles are way too resistant to damage. It's not the damage that swarms do on their own that's the problem, it's the way they do it. And this is key. So if you can stay with me here, we'll learn a key part of the issue with swarms. Look at this. This is a lav with full shields. Notice the efficiency rating here says 80%. This is because shields resist 20% of explosive damage. 100% minus 20% is 80%. Meaning that a swarm missile that does 220 damage will do a maximum of 204 when it hits unhardened shields. But look at the efficiency rating here when we point at a dropship. It says 55%. Why? Dropships have a built-in resistance to swarms. Remember that the lav said 80%, so it's something specific to dropships, otherwise it would say 55% when you point at a lav. Tanks are the same as lavs with 80% efficiency. This is very important. This is our missing factor, and a very interesting one it is too. If we factor this 43% resist, not 45 as there seems to be a stacking penalty thing going on here, then a 220 damage missile gets reduced to 125. The hardeners reduce it down to 50 damage due to the 60% resist. So these combined things are what's dropping swarm damage so low. Now take a look at this. That dropship up there has no shields left, but look at the efficiency rating, 55%. That's the same as it is for shields. If explosives do 20% more damage to armor, surely it would be 105% once you factor in the innate 15% dropships have. The fact that it stays at 55% means one thing. The swarms do not do bonus damage to dropship armor. The other possibility is that swarms do the 20% bonus to armor, but armor on dropships has a 45% resist to swarms. This gives you the same 55% efficiency when targeting armor as 25% does with shields. Either way, what we have is very useful. Firstly, remember that lavs and tanks show 80% efficiency when we point a swarm at them, while dropships show 55%. This means the developers can change the damage a weapon does based on the type of vehicle it's pointing at. Secondly, they can adjust the damage done based on that same weapon hitting armor or shields, and they can change that per vehicle. What this means is we can adjust swarms to hit tanks harder than dropships, and shield tanks harder than shield dropships, or armor tanks harder than armor dropships, or some other variation of. I'm going to show you a few examples of swarms hitting dropships. I'm going to do it using freeze frames so you can see the damage done missile by missile. I'll show you the method once, as it's a bit mathy and dull, and after that I'll just give you the results. Let's start with my trusty Incubus. I have a light armor repper punching out 54 hit points a second in repairs or thereabouts, and an armor hardener that reduces damage by 40%. At this point in the battle I've taken a hit, and as you can see all my shields are gone. My armor is at 2875, which is the maximum this ship has. Here come the swarms. Let's pause there and do a little counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. As you know, malicious swarms fire 4 missiles, advanced 5, and prototype 6. So we know these are malicious swarms. Now what we do not know is whether his skills or damage mods are increasing the missile damage, but that doesn't really seem too important at this point. I'm going, just for this first missile, to talk through the maths. This is so you can see how I do it and so you can trust my conclusions in the future. I'm only going to do this for this first missile, so please indulge me just this once. So that's missile 1 hitting me. Notice that my armor hardener's on. My remaining armor after that is 2800. I started with 2875, remember. 2875 minus 2800 is 75. So missile 1 did 75 hit points of damage. But my armor hardener's on. So that reduced the damage by 40%. We need to work out what the damage was before we reduced it. We do this by taking the damage of 75, and we divide it by 60, then multiply by 100. So before my armor reduced the damage by 40%, the hit was 125 hit points. But we know that swarms have a 55% efficiency against dropship armor. So 125 divided by 57 times 100, that's 220, which is correct as we know. Let's look at the next 4 quickly. So I have 2800 hit points, next missile hits, and I drop to 2725. That's 75 damage again. Next I drop to 2651, that's 74 damage. The last drops me to 2576 health, that's another 75 hit point loss. So in total I took 300 damage. That's not right at all. Same thing, I'll skip the maths again, but this time in a Python with a shield hardener that stops 60% of damage and has the shield's base resist of 20% to explosives. I start with 1548 shields. Here are the swarms, and like before there were 4 of them. So malicious swarms again. Notice my hardener's running too. You see my health drops there before the explosion animation. It's a single frame, so it's not a bug. Missile 1 drops me to 1498 shields. That's a hit of 50. It's like getting hit with an assault rifle. Next missile I'm down to 1448 health. That's another 50 hit point hit. The next missile drops me to 1398, another 50 hit points. The last missile drops me to 1349. That's 49 hit points. I was also being shot from a guy on the other side of this map, and the exact same numbers were popping up from his missiles. So in total that volley did 200 damage. With the 55% efficiency in the hardener, that gives us missiles that had a 220 base damage. Now we have to admit that 50 damage per missile is extremely low. Let's look at the same Incubus battle, different swarmer, but this time I actually have some shields. 4 more missiles, so militia again. Missile 1 does 124 damage, as do the rest. Here's the same thing again. No shield, and I drop from full armor, 2875 to 2377. That's 124 damage per missile, just like the numbers we were getting when they were hitting my shields, even though I have no shields. I take more damage from some of the rifles than swarms are currently doing to tanks and dropships. So this proves that swarms hit shields on dropships for the same damage they hit armor. The dropship's innate resistance to swarms is too high, double hardened vehicles offer too much resistance to damage, and swarms do their damage on a per missile basis, leaving regeneration intact. The last point is worth a little more detail, and then I'll wrap this up. In this clip, I get hit by a single missile from that installation. It does 140 damage. Notice that my shields no longer regenerate, and it takes 8 seconds before they start again. This is because shields have a regeneration threshold. Take too much damage and they stop. 140 hit points is easily enough to do this, as you see. Now look at this tank. 1930 shields and 80% efficiency versus proto swarms with my 10% damage increase. So how much damage do I do? 220 total shields lost. That's 37 damage per missile, which is pathetic. And here's the issue. 37 is below the regeneration threshold, and also a tiny number because this tank is double hardened. So this tank keeps regenerating shields even through my damage. Now my 6 missiles do 2 more damage than a militia rail tank does, but a rail round will stop the regeneration of shields. This stopping leaves the shield tank or dropship much more vulnerable once hit by a rail. Yet even though my swarms do the same amount of damage, the tank can rep straight through it. This is why the tanks can take 12 missiles in a row and still rep. It's really just 12 individual hits of 37, which is kind of like being hit by a combat rifle. Now, I'm not going to suggest the exact model changes here. That's another very long video, and while I do have the answer, if CCP want it, they know how to reach me. But as you see, it's not just about missile damage. All these factors combine to throw swarms off balance. Unless you have built a full-scale damage model, be very careful about saying what you think swarms need. Now over to you, CCP. You've been judged.